Yep, there we go. Recording started. Awesome. Gretchen, you want to kick us off with your awesome presentation?
Sure. Well, welcome to our Adobe Analytics Tips and Treats. We want this to be a very interactive session, so feel free to put questions in the chat or take yourself off mute and ask the question. I think you should be able to do that. And so if you have any questions either about what we're talking about or if there are things that you have questions that we're not going to cover, because we're just going to get you started with a few and then we hope you have some good questions for us. So we're excited to do our spooky presentation. Not too spooky because I don't do spooky season. So let's talk about our house rules. User-focused and safe work. We're not meant to promote or pitch, but we are here to learn and network and problem solve. So like I said, if you have problems, please bring them out. And if OG members share their use cases, all the data you see here will be out of a test report suite. So you can talk about this as much as you want. So these use cases, we're not concerned about that. So we're going to talk about several different things. So we're going to start off with Luke, and he's going to talk about hit types, instances, and occurrences, which can be confusing, I know, and some marketing channels. So, let's start off with Luke.
All right. Thank you so much, Gretchen. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yeah, I might make it a little bit, see if I can make it a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Gretchen.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the questions I get so frequently is like with the page name, hit type. So just to clarify, there's essentially two different hit types we're going to talk about. It's really the page view and then also the page events. So a question I get so many times is what's the difference between page views, page events, and occurrences? So at a very high level, page views happens on the page view hit. Page events is on the link track hit, and then occurrences is really where you add the page views and page events. So if on the beacon, you might see, oh, you know what? I clicked on the link tracking call. I see the page name, but I don't see anything else. So one thing is out of the box page name. It only works with the page view type. So one of the best practices is if you want to see the page name and all your hits types is to copy the page name into an EVAR. And that way you can use instances, page views, events, and occurrences. So that's the very first one. Okay. And then the second one is, in this case, I'm just using the campaign landing page. This is set up as a EVAR. This is really the out-of-the-box campaign. So the landing page instances is really the EVAR instance. So if you want to know how many times did that variable hit, this is where you would use the instances metric. And this where it might be, hey, you have the page views and you have the page events. So looking at line number 1, where you can see the unspecified is set at 0. So basically, that 0 represents it wasn't hit. There was no hit on there. Okay. But then if you also say, hey, line number 2, I see it fired 945 times, but it's also on 4,000 page views and 800 page events and equates out to almost 5,000 occurrences. This happens when you have the persistence. So if you had the campaign landing page to expire on the hit, then basically you would have the landing page instances will match either the page views or the page events, just based on how it's set up. But the persistence, you can have it extend well beyond that initial hit. You can have it extend on visit, or you can have it on multiple visits. So one example might be, it's like, you know what, this campaign landing page, we had a display campaign, and I want to see what is the persistence, let's say for 7 days or 14 days or so on. It really depends on the use case for your company. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I love that page event. I feel like that's like an underutilized metric, or like a hidden metric. Like now, I feel like we're doing a pirate treasure.
Yeah. So a question I always get is like, oh, when do I use page events and occurrences? It's like, well, it really depends on your use case, you know. Um, if you have an EVAR that only hits on page events and it doesn't hit on page views, that's where you can also do some testing, just using your data. It's like, hey, I have this EVAR. It's only supposed to hit on, it expires upon that hit. It only is supposed to fire on page views. So if you have anything showing up on page events, you could see, oh, there's an issue, something there. Maybe it's persistent, or maybe it's just firing on the wrong hit type, and vice versa. Okay.
Yep. Love it.
Yep. And then next example I'm just going to go over is marketing channel has their own instances metric. Okay. And it really depends on how you have it set up. In this case, I'm showing the marketing channel instances where that's when it initially fired. So one thing also with the marketing channels is like, what is the persistent set on, or what is the inactivity date that's set up on? And that's where your page views and page views and visits and also page events will keep on persisting. So those are really the top questions I get quite frequently on the instances, page views, page events, visits, and occurrences. Okay.
Love it.
All right.
No, I forget about, the marketing channel instances as well. I never use those either, or very rarely, like you said, only when
Yeah.
you're like,
So I use it a lot for troubleshooting
mm-hmm.
because people swear it's like, I swear I set that up correctly, and then I can see it's like, well, it's not firing. Okay. Or let's say, for example, you can use it in combination with the campaign landing page or just the
Mm-hmm.
campaign name. It's like, oh, I can troubleshoot to see, it's like, hey, based on this URL, did the campaign instance fire? Did the marketing channel instance fire? And check out some of the persistence that happens.
Yeah.
Like defensive driving or defensive reporting.
Yeah. Yes.
I love it.
Yes. So.
Okay.
And
Oh, do you have anything else?
I think this is it on this. Let me go over my next example with the next page flow.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you have anything built for that, but
Go down one.
I don't see it here.
Oh, I must not saved it.
We can build something.
Yeah.
This next previous item. We'll
just go ahead with it. Just go ahead with the next one. Maybe I didn't save it.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can go back to that if we've got time, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Sure. My tips are talking about our user preferences, or this week we'll call them our boozer preferences. This is something that everyone can set individually, so it can be different for different people. So I, as an admin, even if I set the user's preferences, it's still only for me and it's not for my company. Just, one thing to keep in mind. So a couple of things that I think are worth changing. There's a lot of stuff that is great by default, and there's not a lot you can do. Is your color palette. A lot of times I like to match my color palette to my brand colors. So So you can go out there and change your color palette. If you don't know what your brand colors are, usually you can find someone like in UX or design who can share those with you, or there are just different websites out there. You could just Google them, just Google hex color picker, and you can find a website where you can put in your URL or just like upload a picture from your website that has kind of your brand colors, and it will identify those colors for you. So
that's cool.
You don't need to be able to identify hex colors by hex numbers, for everything. So just go out there, and then there's also lots of just cool things you can like just Google like different color schemes, and it'll give you like a range that all work well together if you want to do that. Sometimes I like to adjust the density, and the density just means like how close together are your rows in your tables. By default, it's got the most white space available. Every once in a while, I'll build a workspace where it's just like so much data that I'll make it to the compact because I want to see the maximum number of rows in my viewport as possible. And so you can change that at the user preference level. You can also change a lot of these settings at the project level as well. So if you need to do something different, you totally can. And I also like to change the default calendar date. I like to use the last 30 full days, because the problem with the default of this month is like Friday is November 1st. So if I like start a workspace, I have like hours worth of data, and I just get annoyed by that. So I also always like to go in and change my default calendar date, and that can be whatever works for you. This week, last week, I just get, this month is great when it is like the 29th of the month. This month is not so great when it's like the 1st or the 2nd of the month. One of my tips is like, I believe no one should use occurrences really ever unless you're doing some troubleshooting. So you can change your default metric away from occurrences. So when you build a freeform table, occurrences won't be your default metric. And you can make that visitors or unique visitors, kind of depend, whatever is kind of the preferred metric for your company, and pick one and go with it, when it comes to visits or unique visitors. So those are a couple of the tips that I have, and I just go in there and go, like I said, anyone can do that.
I think that one with the date range is perfect, because now I'm more of the implementation side. You and Luke are more, the great visuals. But just even when I go in there, I am with you. Like that's always like the first step. I was like, oh, wrong date range, just because of what you said. We were just find it on a weird day, and it's just it'll just make it a lot faster. So
I know. I'm like, what happened to all my data? I have plenty of data yesterday, but
same thing with the visits.
On the 1st of the month, it's caught me before that, and a couple of times. I also suggest, if you are going to do a custom palette, there are a couple things to be aware of. The order of your palette, so the order of your hex numbers that you're going to copy and paste into the custom palette, is the order the colors will be used in all the visualizations. So you really need to think very carefully about your first two colors in particular. So, just think about what's good for the eyes. It's easy to differentiate. Also keep in mind, I know I have almost everywhere I've been, there's been at least one executive that's been colorblind. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting colors. So when you're picking colors, try to vary the, not just the color, but sometimes the tone, because if they can't differentiate the color, they can, differentiate light from dark. And if you have red or green as their brand color, which I have worked at places that have both, have had one place had red, one place has a green, do not have those as your first color, because what happens, your initial color, that first color, why it's important, will be used for all summary numbers. So right now, I work at a company whose brand color is red, but I don't want to have big red numbers on my dashboard. It's what I call
Well, why not,
unnecessary
Gretchen?
executive panic by having big, I mean, there's, it's not a change, but we're just wired that red is bad when it comes to numbers. So just be careful when you're picking your colors for your custom palette. And then also, if you have people, a number of people in your company who do like to use dark mode, who miss ad hoc from time to time, also think about how your colors will look in ad hoc, and that can be their problem. But because so just kind of think about how you're building. So if I have my custom palette, if I build a dashboard, my palette colors will be seen by everyone who opens that dashboard. So even if they have a different color preference, just because I was the one that built that. So that is just a couple of things to keep in mind when you're picking your different colors. And again, all of these are just going to be you could do your user preferences are in your components and your preferences, and then you also have project preferences, project infos and settings. So you can go in here and you can see here. So you're just going to these are just the hex colors. So again, it'll show you the order, the compact, comfortable, expanded. Like I said, the default's expanded. I put this as comfortable. Like I said, sometimes on rare occasion, I'll have a very heavy table workspace that I want them compact because I want to see as much as possible on the screen at the same time. So there's where you can go in and take a look at your colors. So again, of course it's going to load. I should have opened that first. Maybe I'll open Sarah's now.
Oh, thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
So it doesn't have to load. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying think about your colors, because these are your colors. So again, these colors have the kind of the same shade. So for someone who would be colorblind, this might be hard to differentiate because they would both look very similar in a grayscale. This is what I'm meaning about making sure that your first color is not red or green, because you don't want someone thinking 34,000 has any good or bad associated with it. And then also it would, if my color is red, it would just also happen to match my summary change numbers. Your summary change numbers will be red or green, and you can't really change that. That's just part of it. And then, just a hint, when you're doing your summary change numbers here, I have my percent change in my table, but if I were just to visualize this as my percent change, it would just make it a standard number and it wouldn't do the kind of the dynamic percent change. So I actually have to say, which numbers I want to do the percent change. I'm not going to do this off of this cell, my negative 18.5%, because it wouldn't look like an up or down and it wouldn't change. It would look like a normal number. And it's old value first and then the new value. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, because that triangle up and down is really pretty sweet, Yeah.
Yep. And the color aspect of it, Gretchen, also is accessibility. Just making sure everybody, is able to view it.
Yep. And, another thing I'm a big fan of is Streamline or Screaming Line, your database. I'm a big fan, and you can do a couple of these, actually set them in your user preferences, but remove those unnecessary numbers and backgrounds. Default is adding those percents, and they are generally fairly useless and distracting numbers. At times they are meaningful, but not every table, those percents make sense.
Yeah.
Backgrounds, limit the rows in the tables. Users can expand the table to see more if you need them. Use your interactive filters. Use those to take advantage if you have to have multiple ways to slice the data, and that, you know, it won't take as much space visually, but you can still get to the same information. And collapse the data. So organize data, but what needs to be seen and what is supporting. So think about like an appendix. So, you know, if it's, you can have like the summary numbers and charts kind of expanded so there's open, and then supporting tables can be kind of collapsed or hidden. That just really helps improve load time. And then visual clutter. You know, a lot of people, if they're not, when they're not looking at Adobe all day like we are, they get overwhelmed. So I just want you to contrast this column here where I've removed these percentages, and the colors, you know, it's the same number, but this is just a little cleaner. It's easier to read. I mean, 41.8% doesn't make any sense. I mean, people will look at this and say, hey, that doesn't add up to 100. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It doesn't when they make, you know, yes, because you can fall into multiple buckets with this visits metric. So just make sure, again, you can just go into your settings here and remove the percent and the background. You know, at one point, I had gone into my user preferences and unchecked show percent, but then, like for an example like this, where your metric is a percent, then it doesn't. Then it's a blank. Then it's a blank column, which doesn't help either. So, so I had to turn my percentages back on and just take them off when I don't want them. But I just feel like, especially if you're working with people like who aren't as comfortable with numbers as I hope that we all are, I think this just makes things a lot easier for them. When I'm making a workspace just for me, no one will see. I don't always do that, but these are steps I do take when I am sharing out my information or what I've built with people. And
we got a couple. Yeah, we got something in the chat saying, a lot of people ask why the total is not matching. So
yes, they do. And then, you know, another thing, if you make a calculated metric that's like a percent, you know, it'll add that up instead of showing like that calculate that metric as a total. So you know, you can always go in here and turn off the totals when the totals don't make sense as well. So
and that spark line, I have yet to get behind the spark line. I feel like it's too tiny. I don't know. Maybe I'm just
I don't know. I don't care about the spark line, not because that's what's up here. I care about the background. That's what I don't like.
Yeah,
is the background.
So Gretchen, I've had a couple times where I just use the background and not the numbers.
Yes.
So we can see visually.
But again, that's you know, one or the other is fine. The visual clutter and yes, but just reducing your kind of visual load and mental load of having to kind of look through that. Like I said, these percentages make sense. No, these don't make sense. And then, you know, you can create calculated metrics to avoid, you know, here I've got a table. And again, instead of, I see a lot of people like, I want to know mobile and non-mobile traffic, and then we'll break down kind of each page. And I'm like, no, just put those across the top. Again, we're trying to present the fewest numbers possible to tell our story. So that's what we're trying to do. And I could even, but here I have a number, I've got mobile and non-mobile. And again, this is where the percentages make no sense, because why is this not across 100, right? Why, you know, I want this, and you can't do that. That tricks you by saying, oh, I can calculate percentages by row, but that still doesn't give you what you want. So, because this doesn't add up to 100, right? It's so, it's, so I don't think that's what you want.
So do either of you use the dark mode? Like for me, I don't like the dark mode at all. So I never use a dark mode in the browser or anything. So
I use dark mode when I get when I miss my old friend Ad Hoc. But if I was never going to share my screen, I'd probably use dark mode all the time. But again, I work with a lot of people who find analytics a little scary and like, I don't know what they do, what's going on. So I try and keep my workspace as light and bright and cheery. So
I feel like when people share, like it's hard for me to read stuff when it's in dark mode, like when they're sharing a screen. I don't know. Might be my contacts or my eyesight vision, but to the two comments in the chat, you do look pretty like cool when you're in dark
it looks cool, but you know, we always say be cool, not be productive, not cool. So we're trying to simplify, make people this whole concept of digital analytics not scary, and some people would find that overwhelming. So, and then you know, just create calculated metrics for common percentages. So like these two tables have the same information. This actually gives me, this is the useful information. I don't have to do math here. Like what percent of my traffic is from mobile? That's probably really what I'm wanting to know. Okay, 8,032 is kind of 40,000, almost a quarter. Yeah, so I've taken that away. And then I don't have total traffic here. If I'm showing this, I'm like, oh. So, you know, I can always add another visits column to say, but now I've got 3 numbers going across. And so just again, think about how to tell your story with the least amount of numbers that people can see. And that just makes people a little more comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And again, set your default metric in your user preferences, because if I'm going to build a table here, if I'm going to build my marketing channel, and I don't, you know, so I have it set to visits, so it didn't go to occurrences, because occurrences are good for debugging and testing, but not really good for analysis. So save yourself a step. And set that.
Forget speed to market. It's speed to analysis.
Right. Yes. Cut down the drag and drop.
It's like, do you get paid for the line of code? You get paid for every drag and drop. Awesome.
Okay, so I think that covers my tips. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about implementation. And this is let's hit the chat first, Gretchen. You got some love showing there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that too. Yes, because you know, numbers are scary to so many people, and you know, growing up, my dad was a math teacher, but I didn't like math that much, and I'm like, I'm never going to use this stuff. And I mean, yeah, I never used anything I learned in geometry, but my algebra comes into play. So,
I love that, Nate.
Oh my gosh, Nate, bringing in
the nerd.
I'm gonna go laugh at that. Oh my gosh, now we're gonna be summoning weird stuff here. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Best chat ever.
So we gotta share with people that numbers aren't scary, and like you said, showing the least amount of numbers is the way to make it approachable. I really feel.
No, and I think like just even looking at that when you showed your percentage of mobile, like my mind instantly like, okay, then subtract 100, and it was actually more meaningful to me, I think, than looking at those numbers or even seeing like a third row that showed that number. So I think that was awesome.
Yep.
No, and so to make sure this is our daunting data hunt. And so what this, I know like everybody's like, why are you talking about Excel and screenshots? Like how boring after all that great stuff Luke and Gretchen just talked about.
Excel's so awesome too.
I love it. But what this is going to treat, so it's kind of like the last bullet. So last bullet first, we're going to treat like our product owners, or your other, so I can treat Gretchen and Luke too, but they are analysts, because we want to be able to have sometimes there's really long flows. So like, I know Gretchen and Luke, you're both in the finance industry. And so sometimes like if you're filling out an application for opening a checking account or something with your 401k, there's a lot of steps. And if you guys are trying to debug something, you talk about all the great things that you can debug before here, with your occurrences. But sometimes you just need to know where a piece of data is. Like, at what step is this piece of data getting collected? So back to you, Luke, like, hey, when was this data firing? And so you can use the tips that you guys have shared. And if you use this tip where you document, like you will go through and document the flow. And what you can do is go and open up this Excel really fast and see each step in the flow and where that data is truly getting captured. So like where it's captured versus where it's getting persisted to. And you don't have to try to find credentials, for the dev environment or hope that the dev environment is up. And not that any of that's bad. It's just like, that's why dev environments are down. It's hard to find credentials. Maybe the credentials got wiped. So those scenarios isn't there for you anymore to easily get to. And really what you want to do, like Gretchen or Luke or the other analysts on this call, is you just want to troubleshoot the data. Or you just want to finish this report so you can turn off your computer, go have dinner. And so what I'm saying that we should do is you open an Excel and you just start that first page of the flow. And what you need to take is a screenshot of the page, because everybody's like, we'll just cut down on the conversation of like, well, is it really that page or is it this page you're talking about? So it's always great to have that visual. And then a screenshot of the data layer. And so here, now I'm busted because I was in incognito when I took this photo. So that's why it looks like I'm in dark mode. I was really incognito, but it's the data layer. And this is the Luma data site that Adobe always uses. So you guys can go to this Luma site, see their data layer, do any of the tutorials, especially with CJA and AEP implementations. They use this site a lot for that. But then you see the site, you see the data layer, and then also get your analytics call in there. If you're using app measurement, you can either go to the network tab. Yes, Gretchen, thank you for dropping that in there. And search on /B/SS, our good old, that will show you in the network tab the calls. Or my favorite extension ever is the debugger for Adobe Analytics, and that will put it right in your console and have it really nicely mapped out for you. Because then what you have is you have your analytics that was fired, and you have your data layer. Because sometimes there's stuff in the data layer that maybe wasn't in the analytics call. And so like if Luke is doing some troubleshooting and pulling together a report, he's like, oh man, I see, Sarah, that in the data layer, there's this piece of data that would really be helpful to me, but I don't see it in the analytics call. Can you get that data for me? Then it's a little bit simpler because it's already in the data layer. It's like going into launch or whatever tag management system you're using and picking that piece of data up out of the data layer and adding it to the call. But if it's not in the data layer, that's when Luke's like, hey, I don't see this piece of data. I know it should be on this page. Can you work with the dev team to surface that to the data layer so we can get it? So that's why these three pieces are so important to have. Now, if you're using the Web SDK, where you'll want to get your network call is you'll want to use the Adobe Experience Platform Debugger. And in there, you can grab the events. And so you can copy it. There's a little copy feature, but if you were to paste it here, it'd just be like one really long line of data that's really hard to see. But if you drop it into like a JSON formatter, like jsonformatter.org is one that I use, it will put it into this like little tree, much easier to reformat. And then you can just copy and paste. So I know this does take effort. It's not a small task, but once you have it done, so many people will love and appreciate it. And Gretchen and I were actually talking about this tip this weekend over lunch. And Gretchen's like, hey, try to transpose in Excel, but I couldn't get it to work. So maybe you guys who are better at Excel can get the transpose function to work versus going to use the JSON formatter. But that's what I use. Oh, yeah.
We all have that problem, Sanjita.
Yes, inspecting for an app, insurance, yeah. What I've seen other people use is, well, what I've done on your iOS is you can use Charles. And once you have it set up and it works, like you've aligned all the planets. Yes, you got it, Christine. Good old Charles works for
Good old
iOS.
Charles.
It will let you intercept and then put to your laptop the calls that are going off. But Android, Chuck Barkley, good old Charles, that's hilarious. With Android, I don't have that luck. With Android, we've had to just use a simulator. So like I've seen your dev departments or your app developers probably have like a simulator that they use, like Perfecto or something like that. And then you can, usually that type of tool has a capability of letting you see like your console and your network tab, like doing that, letting you see your developer tools. So there's definitely an additional step there, and it's a simulation. It's not like production, like for we're doing here. It is hard to use, Charles. I completely agree. It's not fun, and I know like whenever I've used it, I've definitely done like a victory dance when I actually saw my calls coming across. Like so, yes, it's not that one's definitely a trick more than a treat. Oh, Kristen, you got to work on Android. See, very temperamental. Okay, because I guess I just had the temperamental end of the deal.
I know.
Agreed. But yeah, so once you have this, then just put it out where everybody can access it. And I've done this in a couple different places, and it's amazing how many times people tell you they love it. So it makes your heart happy that you put in this time and effort, and people use it quite a bit. So awesome. That is Andrew. I know there's boys out on Experience League that we can put like items and people can vote them up. So if you guys, we can go out there and see if someone else has put that in there and we can vote up their idea. Or you can just put something in the questions. You can post questions. And I mean, I was out there looking at the Experience League questions the other day, and a lot of them are getting answered, and people will pull in some Adobe people and say, hey, can you chime in on, what's the roadmap looking like on this? Because, yeah, being able to QA your mobile app, that's so necessary. Other things in launch, so we're talking implementation here. So your lurking launch cleanup is your extensions, and all of these, you guys can like figure out what my life has been doing here, like what I've been doing at work here lately in my work life. It's everything we're talking about right now. Going through and documenting some different flows through our application, and we're also updating extensions. So you always want to keep an eye on them. I understand you might not want to be on the latest and greatest if you don't want to be like on the cutting edge, but we don't want to get too far behind. That way you can make sure that you're taking advantage of and being able to use some of the, sometimes with the new functionality, you need to be on a newer release, a newer version of it. For sure, though, read those release notes before hitting the upgrade button and launch. And so you think I would have bookmarked them by now, but I swear I think it's easier for me just to put like core extension release notes in Google and go find it. And they do a pretty good job of listing what's happening or what's occurred, what's changed. And then depending on how big the change is, it will help me judge on when should I actually upgrade this extension. Like if we have like some big releases going out that we have a lot of tracking going in, with it, I probably won't do it then. Because with extensions, there's no turning back. Once you upgrade it or update it, you can't roll back a version. And so if something were to happen when you updated it and you're doing QA and something is just tracking a little bit differently than before, if there's a big release looming, then you're just going to really be under the gun to try to figure out like what changed between the versions in your extension and get that rectified. So I try to do it like once a quarter, just look at it, but then really do take your time on saying, okay, when's the right time to do this? When's a lighter release? Because sometimes you might be tied to a product release. not always with launch can you just launch, deploy whenever you're ready. Sometimes you have to align it with other business units, but look for like maybe a smaller one or a light time in the load. Yes. I love that you like the track tip. Oh, Shane, look at you guys. I love you so much. So on the track, yes, you guys are reading the track tip. It is so helpful to know what rules are being used, because that way when you're debugging, you can be like, I see this. Once again, just to see what's going on. And so Shane, if you have multiple rules firing on an interaction, the event rule name where you need to put this, so like event evar29 is where I stick ours. So evar29, you need to put that line of code. Gretchen, I should have cut and pasted that so we can see if we can drop it in the chat. Because what that line of code is saying, hey, set evar29 equal to, and then after that, it's actually like an if-then statement. We're saying if s.evar29, so if evar29 exists, then the question mark is the then take that existing evar29 and append the secondary rule name to it. So this way, Shane, you're not like stomping on top of it, you're appending to it. So I'll say evar29, and here I used a tilde. You guys have to look at your launch rule names to say, like, do you use a tilde in your names? Don't use that. Usually I use a pipe, but we use pipes in our launch names, so that wouldn't have worked. So I used the tilde to say, here's my first rule name, tilde, second rule name. Awesome, see you, David. And then otherwise, the colon means else. Then just, if evar29 is not set, then just put the rule name in it. And this has to go in each one of your rules. It can't go in the extension. It needs to be in the individual rules to be able to pick up that name. And I usually put it in the custom code area, and I put it on my s.t and s.tl. So anytime you're sending a call out, anytime that this could be a rule could be used, you want it on there. And so another helpful thing to track is the build date, especially talking apps like the mobile apps that we're talking about, because not everybody updates their app at the same time. So if you're troubleshooting or if you're seeing a funky value and you don't understand, like, hey, that was like 3 releases ago, when you have that build date in there, you can break down like those weird values that you weren't expecting by that build date evar or prop, wherever you want to put it, and you can see like, oh, well, this person hasn't upgraded. They're still on 3 releases ago, and that's why I'm not seeing what I expected. So that definitely comes in super helpful with your mobile app. And then another thing with launch is just doing some cleanup, like with the data elements, rules, and extensions. Like it can be like overwhelming when you see like you have 300 rules or 200 data elements. You're just like, oh no. But then when you sort them, you're like, oh, well, a lot of these are disabled. My advice to you is, number one, make sure that that data element or rule or extension, even though it's disabled, look, kind of in your history to make of that rule. You can click on the right panel. That's why I'm pointing over here on my right panel, and see if it actually got published to production. Because sometimes it's really easy to disable something in the launch and then forget that even though you disabled it within the UI, you still need to publish it to production to make it disabled in production. So make sure it's been disabled and pushed to production, and then you can go ahead and delete them. That way it's nice and tight. You're not overwhelmed with a bunch of disabled, or when you're doing a search too, you don't come in like the search reveals 4 things and 3 of the 4 are disabled. Like just get rid of them. And that's where, using your evar29 in this case, like that's a really great way to say, hey, what ones are not even being used? So run that evar29 or whatever evar you want to put in, run that for a year or something like that. And that will help you also say like, oh, well, this rule is no longer being triggered. And another thing that we're starting to implement too is not only that evar29, but we're starting to capture, we use an event-driven data layer. So I want to capture all the event names that are getting pushed to our event-driven data layer, our EDDL, for twofold. One, I want to make sure that we're tracking all of it, because sometimes, you send over your instructions to the dev team and they can do like 95% of it, and that 5% is done later as a fast follow. Well, maybe that fast follow we just accidentally forgot to put on launch. And so they're pushing an event name to the data layer with like maybe an error tracking or something like that. But we didn't realize it, or we forgot that the fast follow had gone to production, and we're not actually finding off any analytics to capture that, maybe that error message or a click on something. By capturing those event names, I can take those, we'll put them in an EVAR or list, right? I can take those and go make sure that I have a launch rule that is getting triggered by that event name. So this is kind of definitely something that I, as an implementation person, would do. Maybe Gretchen and Luke won't ever report on this, but I can make sure that I have a solid and full implementation and that all events in the data layer are accounted for. Awesome. Thanks, Gretchen. And then rest in peace release workspace. And truly, you will be able to rest in peace if you have this release workspace. I have a workspace panel for each release. And I can actually just copy and paste. I just duplicate my panel every time there's a new release because there's a lot of the same underlying things. Because I want to include like the date and time that my launch library is pushed. And Gretchen, if you want to flip over, I have an example one. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So here, I name on my panel is the date of the release. I say when it was pushed production, at what time, what date. I put in there what was included in this release. So pretended that we updated to track the launch rule name and that we just deleted 5 disabled things, like we are listening to what we talked about earlier today. And then I have, these look like links because they're kind of faux links, but in my real life, I link out to the JIRA tickets that supported this. So that way, if I needed to go back and get a little bit more information, like those would link to, or whatever ticketing system that you guys use. And some of the metrics that I always have, and that's where we can duplicate, I usually duplicate a panel, is like visits. We don't want visits to flatline. Like no matter what you're doing, visits should never flatline. Like there's a problem. And so I always look at visits or like unique visitors and trend it. I trend the day of the release to that same point last week. So once again, I'm not Gretchen, I'm not Luke, I'm not the awesome analyst, but I am an implementation person, and I know this time last week is probably going to be close enough to this time this week that I can make sure like we're not flatlining, we're not clipping. This is fake data. So here, something happened last week that really launched the orange line high into space, but we can see my purple line of today's, release date. I pretended that we released on the 24th. It's staying a little stable, so we've not flatlined. So I do this with visits. I do it with unique visitors. If you scroll down, Gretchen. And once again, you gotta love test data. Thanks for anchoring that off to 0 for me. I appreciate that. These are just to make sure I've not done something crazy and killed all analytics. Afterwards, as you go down further through my workspace, then that's when you can do your KPIs. So once again, even though you shouldn't have touched maybe orders or sign-ins, you always want to keep an eye on your main KPIs. And yours could be something else. It could be newsletter sign-ups, but make sure that those are always still tracking to where you expect them to be. And I like to see them by hour. That way we know. I don't want to be fooled that like at my 9 o'clock deploy at night, I don't want their whole day that happened to kind of mask that something happened at 10 o'clock, an hour after I deployed. And then, so these are all typical, so that's why I duplicate my panel. And then afterwards, you can add on stuff that's specific to release, like if you made a new event or started to capture a new EVAR. Awesome. And you will be able to rest in peace because now you'll know that your data didn't flatline. You still have analytics coming in. So that's a good one. Thank you. And then, we have some wicked good reads. Now I just sound like I'm from Boston with wicked good reads. Kind of going out of order, but mine's at the end. Anything by Brian AU. You can find him on the Experience League. He writes the best blogs. I love his blogs. He's come out with some amazing ones lately, talking about data egress, like how to get data out of AEP and CJA. He has a great table on it. Yes, Josh, I agree. His blogs are awesome. He's kind of talked about what it takes to be like a good CJA product owner. So definitely look for him. I follow him on LinkedIn because he'll always put stuff that he writes on LinkedIn too. So it's really easy for me to click it and go read it. And then also Measure Slack. And I will drop the link into Measure Slack because I know a lot of, like, I think, Josh, I see you on Measure Slack. I see some other people, I think, on Measure Slack. And it is phenomenal. Adobe is very active on it. So if you have questions, I just love going out there and reading it. You learn something new from people just posting, hey, this is what I'm running into. And then there's great conversation. So definitely hop on Measure Slack and it's just really fantastic content that you see going out there. And you get your questions answered. I see a lot of great, conversations happening. Gretchen, I'll flip it over to you as I get the link for Measure Slack.
Okay. Well, I put in the digital marketing podcast. I don't like to read stuff that's informational. I only like to read for fun. But I work with a lot of marketers, and so it's important for me to just kind of keep up with what's happening in digital marketing in general. So I enjoy theirs. They did one on content marketing this week, or actually it was probably last week. Very recently, whenever it's like a weekly podcast or every other week or something. So it's not a ton of time. So I enjoy them just because it's important for me to kind of stay up with marketing trends. It just kind of helps me as an analyst to kind of know what's happening in the greater marketing space. And then just keep up on those Adobe release notes. They've made it so much easier to find. It's on that homepage now. So just keep up with that. And then they'll slip them in with the little tips that they have down in the corner as well. So just kind of keeping an eye on those as well.
Yep. No, I love the analytics power hour also. So.
Yes, I listen to it sometimes. I have a short attention span, so an hour is a really hard commitment for a podcast for me. That's why I like the digital marketing podcast, because it's like 30 minutes. That's like most you get.
Gretchen, that means you have a very short commute, because on my hour-long commute, that's where the Power Hour podcast comes in handy.
I know, but see, I don't have a commute. My commute is like, 30 steps in 30 seconds. Right? But I always start my day with my podcasts.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, they are the best, Josh.
I'm jealous. So, Gretchen, if you want to reload the report.
Actually, this is a PDF. Oh, reload the report? Yeah, I could do that.
Yes.
Okay. Did you put you got your next page in there?
Yes. So this was the other tip I had. So go to the second to the last. No, go. Keep on going. I made a new panel for it.
Okay.
I sometimes drive, so I stay in touch with
So I've received this question multiple times. It's like, you know what? The flow is just too busy for me.
Yeah.
I want to see in a table. Okay. So if you scroll down.
Yes, and this is also this path metrics is a metric you will find nowhere else.
Yes.
In Adobe, so I think it can be confusing.
So this is where I've really made a segment. I'll show you how I created this segment, but basically I'm able to say, hey, after the home page, what is the next page after the what is the next page? I have it both set up as a table, and then also they can see as a visualization. Okay. So the first time I saw this segment, I'm like, wow, this is really complex. I don't know how many people can come up on it on its own. So if you go down one more, you can use the next or previous panel to essentially create it. Okay, and so that's what I did. And then once it creates that segment, if you click on the eye, the information, you can edit it, the pencil. And then you can make it a project level segment. Okay, that way you can put it into other panels, or let's say, you know what, this is pretty much what I need, but I need to change the page name to something else. So this is where I would say, hey, maybe it's the app page or something like that. Just make sure you do the save as, so you can reuse that segment, because to create that segment on its own will be very complex for me. So this is my little hack to put the next page into a table and a visualization, and then I can repurpose it for other things.
I love it. I love taking advantage of stuff Adobe does for you to then reuse their segments.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, using segments that you make with funnels is the best.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I put that YouTube link from here in the chat too, so you've got it.
Perfect. I love it, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, all the numbers really do match up. So
yeah, to Gretchen's point, that path view, yeah, it doesn't match anything else. So when you're trying to tick and tie numbers, you're just like,
yeah.
I know, because people like that, because they're looking at a table of visits or unique visitors, like, that doesn't match. I'm like, yeah, I totally know.
So in this case, we'll see the total path views is 255 something.
Yeah.
254472. If you subtract the exits, so the pink or the red, if you subtract the exits, that will equal the page views in this case. In this case, it works out great.
Woohoo! Look at you. Oh.
Nice.
Well, we are right on the hour. Do you want to wrap us up, Gretchen?
Yes.
Yes. So just to wrap up, we're going to continue this next year, so we're super excited. We would like to hear from you what you guys would like to learn more about. These are just some ideas. It's not a comprehensive list. But anything about data collection and Web SDK, Sarah's the go-to gal for all of that, as well as the CJA setup. And then, we can talk about Workspace, both in analytics and CJA, and just what you can do in the Adobe Analytics admin setup as well. So we've got one vote for CJA so far. So,
and we'd love to have you guys present too. I know that's what Josh has emailed about. So Gretchen and Luke, I'll be introducing you to Josh Stevens, who's on the call. I know he has some stuff that he's excited to talk about. So if you guys would also like to, step up and be a guest presenter, we would love that and are definitely open to that. And we're excited. Josh sent over some list of items that he would like to talk about, and they're looking great. I just haven't had a chance to get them in front of Gretchen and Luke yet, so I apologize, Josh, but we will, and we'll get you slated in here in 2025. So it is going to be wonderful.
Yes, and it'll be 2025 before we know it.
I know. November is a couple days.
I know.
Well, awesome.
One more Halloween pun for you all, courtesy of Sarah.
That's all, folks. Well, awesome. Thank you, guys. This has been fun. You guys are awesome.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye.